Hello and welcome to another episode of Gemstone Mine. I'm John, and today we have another lesson from cEDH. cEDH is a metagame within the Commander format that sits at one extreme with highly consistent, highly efficient decks. Not all cards are equally powerful in all formats, or even in all metagames, but there are lessons to be learned from how players are using some of the most powerful cards in Magic's history. And today, we're going to continue to talk about Jeskai. Jeskai is a combination of white, blue, and red, and we heard from Callahan from the Mind Sculptors a few weeks ago talking about their cEDH brew in Arden, Crom, Jeskai Stoneblade. If you haven't caught that episode yet, check it out. Arden allows you to do some things that are definitely not possible in any other deck in Commander, let alone in cEDH. And this is definitely a deck that Cal has been putting a lot of effort and time into tinkering with. And as we've done before, we're going to analyze this color combination and see what's possible that we can do within those limitations. First though, thanks once again for joining us on Gemstone Mine here on CCO Media Group. I know that people really enjoy these color philosophy and strategy episodes, and if you think that this video has earned it, show us a little bit of support with a like, subscribe, a comment, I really need to figure out what the heck they call all these things on all these different platforms. Anyway, with all that stuff out of the way, it really does go a long way to helping us out with the algorithm. And it really does help us grow our community here with CCO Media Group. But without further ado, what is Jeskai? As we mentioned, it's a combination of red, white, and blue, and we've covered two of those combinations before. Last month was Azorius month, and in that arc we covered blue and white and saw what they were capable of as an extremely powerful controlling color combination. Thanks to white's recent glow up in the past years, it also has some of the best turn-over-turn commander agnostic resource engines in the game. You get to play your Mystic Remora and your Rhystic Study alongside your Archivist of Ogma and your Esper Sentinel, and just draw boatloads of cards, letting you cruise comfortably into the mid-game. Azorius lacks the raw speed to outrace most other decks, but if you can get those first few turns stabilized and follow our mantra for playing control with first, don't lose, well, not that hard to then move on to step 2 and keep your opponents manageable and predictable. But when you add red to the mix, that means we've got Izzet in our tool belt. And as we described Izzet a little bit during our arc of Teamer, the color pair that often leads into Spellslinger and sometimes Artificer deck themes, but importantly for our standpoint from deck building in general, Izzet often adds a significant amount of speed to a deck, coupling additional card velocity from red's impulse draw and rummaging with red's powerful rituals, which are second only to black's, which were the ones that actually named the entire category to begin with. Izzet also has some of the most potent ways to control the stack with both of the best free if you control your commander spells in the form of Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship, in addition to the extra oomph that you can sometimes help you win counterspell wars with cards like Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast. So at first blush, there's a really nice complementary nature between Izzet and Azorius. Blue's foundational card draw cards like Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study, enhanced and made more consistent by white's engines like Archivist and Sentinel, we then sprinkle in just a little bit of additional consistency with cards like Faithless Looting and similar red-enabled card velocity alongside red rituals like Rite of Flame. Jeskai's Will deserves special mention here, because if you control your commander, it's both a ritual and an impulse draw, and one that can be very powerful at that. But we still need to look at the last two-color pair that makes up this combination in Boros. Boros is often relegated to being the attacky color combination where you're going to see payoff triggers from getting in with combat damage or just with making attacks. As red and white are both pretty good at going wide with small creatures, which is why you see commanders like Winota at the top of the Boros commander list on edhrec.com, as she really does lean into that attacky, pay you off with value. This attacky girl with the hair bun seems to illustrate one of the core strengths that Boros has over Azorius in aspects of control. Boros gets all of white's great stacks elements, but it usually is not in as much danger as being overwhelmed as Azorius is, because usually the Boros deck is the one doing the attacking. The addition of red also lends some speed into closing out the game alongside white's gameplay of keep your opponents predictable and manageable, and then win the game comfortably. as Boros decks tend to have a smaller number of turns between establishing a controlling board state and closing out the game than their other Azorius cousins might. Boros as a color pair also sees overlaps in red and white with having an affinity for artifacts, but especially for equipment. We get Stoneforge Mystic and Steel Shaper's Gift in white, but we also get a cEDH deck all its own in the form of Godo Bandit Warlord from red. But when you put them all together, you also get a critical mass of equipment tutors with cards like Fighter Class and Callan Fey-Blooded, to the point where a deck that includes Boros is probably pretty confident that can find almost any equipment at once without too much trouble. Combined with ways to cheat equip costs, which go beyond Arden to include cards like Sigarda's Aid, newer tech like Forge Anew, and even creatures who just really want to be equipped like Frodo, Determined Hero. Boros got a nice glow up in Strixhaven when it got the Lorehold makeover, exploring removing cards from your graveyard as a way to generate value. Honestly, a concept that didn't really carry over too much into cEDH, but did provide a lot of fun new direction for Boros decks in Casual. And I've got it on good authority that some people are making some real headway with some interesting Osgir the Reconstructor decks in cEDH. From a purely cEDH perspective, we usually also want to look at what a particular color pair unlocks in the form of interaction as well, as Boros Charm provides some casual all-star power, and us old hats to the format probably remember when Wear Tear was one of the premier removal spells that you could get. Red supplements White's removal with some additional damage, and this damage-based removal has only become more relevant as we have seen the format speed up more and more over time. Lower creature toughnesses, better removal from red. Remember, just as a general note, whenever spoiler season rolls around, do not forget, check those uncommon and common modal red removal spells. They're often going to tag on 2 to 3 damage with a really nice utility effect. Sometimes it's destroying an artifact with something like a Braid, sometimes it's additional looting with Cathartic Pyre. There is almost always something at least worth looking at in this slot. But something that I neglected to talk about during Teamer Month definitely deserves mention in Jeskai Month, and that is that red adds some of the most powerful spells in the format, when most of our post-game talks often start with, well, if I had just one more turn, I could have won. And red gives you that. Final Fortune, Last Chance, and Warrior's Oath all allow you to spend red for an extra turn, one last opportunity to push the envelope and try to score a win. And Boros adds a unique twist on this, with Chance for Glory, which for just one white and a red lets you take an extra turn while also making all of your creatures indestructible forever. Well, at least until you either win on your next turn or you lose, at which point them being indestructible doesn't matter a whole heck of a lot. Final Fortune and Chance for Glory in particular deserve special mention because they are instants. Yes, extra turn spells as instants. This means you can take advantage of minute windows of opportunity in turn order when one player has gone for it and been stopped to interject yourself into the turn order and be the first person to untap and take a turn. Put it all together and Jeskai gets a lot of powerful elements. It's definitely a color identity that seizes control of the stack better than almost any other between a base of blue counter magic, white silences, and red's additions in the form of the blasts and deflecting swat. Boros' affinity for the combat step allows the otherwise slow Azorius control strategy to close out the game more quickly. Adding blue's additional artifact tutors makes this color combination pretty good at finding artifacts, but especially equipment. There are a critical mass of tutors for very small creatures in the form of Ranger Captain of Eos and Recruiter of the Guard and Imperial Recruiter. And all in all, Jeskai just has some great card velocity. And you know who else has great card velocity? Our sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. I put it in order with Fusion, save some money using the promo codes that are on your screen right now, or I guess down in the description if you're on the audio-only version of this episode. And they ship my cards to me lightning fast, from all the way up in Canada down to me in the US because, yes, they do ship international. They got some other stuff on there too. I'm running Shadow of the Dragon Queen right now for my D&D group, and I could have saved some money if I had just ordered from Fusion instead and used the promo codes that are on the screen. That's FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. Now, as usual, I would like to take a look at what the top commanders in Jeskai to get a sense of the themes that the color identity has taken as a whole, as commanders usually play an outsized role in what directions a deck can be built. At number 10, we have Commodore Guff, a Super Friends or Planeswalkers Matter commander, which is certainly a unique direction, but definitely not crazy, as blue is often really good at supporting Planeswalkers with proliferate effects. At number 9, it's Pramicon Sky Rampart, which, if you look at its top includes and high synergy cards on EDH Rec, is typically built as a controlling Pillow Fort type deck, using its commander's ability to insulate itself from attacks. Gavi Nest Warden is next at number 8, a Cycling Matters commander whose top cards pretty much reflect this. She lets you cycle one card per turn for free, and if you draw 2 or more cards on a turn, you get this adorable little dinosaur cat token. Number 7 is Elsha of the Infinite, who lets you cast non-creature spells off the top of your library, and put a pin in that, because we are going to talk about Elsha again in a few minutes. Number 6 is Eowyn, Shield Maiden, a really neat take on Humans Matter who can flood the board with tokens if you cast another human before combat. At number 5, we have the original Narset, Enlightened Master, one of the original OG Jeskai cEDH decks, and put a pin in that one too. Number 4 is Zedru the Greathearted, one of the original Group Hug casual decks, and another OG Jeskai cEDH deck. Put a third pin in it. I promise this will make sense in a minute. Narset Enlightened Exile, the Desparked Narset, is number 3 as a go-wide tokens deck at most casual tables, but also as a blazing fast cEDH deck that is one of my personal favorites. Our number 2 Jeskai commander is Hinata the Dawncrowned, another Spellslinger commander who rewards you with discounts on your spells if that target multiple creatures, meaning that Hinata is often built as an X-Spells Matter deck. And number 1 is Kaikar, Wind's Fury, a Spellslinger who gets to go wide with non-creature spells that make tokens that you can either attack with or sacrifice to get red mana like so many ghostly treasures. Put a pin in Kaikar too. One element that should stand out in looking at the top Jeskai commanders is just how many of them care about non-creature spells. Both Narsets, Elsha, and Kaikar leaning into the mechanic Prowess, which was originally defined in the Tarkir block as the keyword ability for the Jeskai way. And our top Jeskai specific cards, according to EDH Rec, back this up. Whirlwind of Thought and Jeskai Ascendancy are the only 2 to crack the top 100 list of multicolored spells played in the format. Both of these encourage you to storm off with non-creature spells, with the former rewarding you with raw card draw, and the latter with looting, untaps, and repeatable temporary anthems that mimic the effect of Prowess. Artifact, equipment, instants, and sorceries are all non-creature spells. And yes, Commodore Guff, so are Planeswalkers. And these are all themes that we've seen in our component color pairs a few moments ago. All those pins I asked you to put in those few commanders? Time to sit down with John, as it's time for a history lesson, because the fossil record of a fascinating evolution in cEDH is present when we look at Jeskai. You see, in the earliest days of cEDH metagame, before it was even really defined as such or had a name, the first Jeskai decks were Narset, Enlightened Master, and Zedru the Greathearted. Narset Turns was a deck that was notorious for being that pub stomper deck, which the late and great Sheldon Menery talked about bringing back Banned as a commander for, where the Narset player would load up their deck with extra turn spells and swing, hoping to hit one of those extra turn spells turn over turn over turn until they managed to stitch together a win. Zedru the Goathearted went the other direction from Narset's proactive game plan, though, handing out stacks effects like Winter Orb or straight-up chaos cards like Confusion in the Ranks to slow the game down to a crawl and to make interaction difficult to use. However, over a fascinating period of about 9 months, Jeskai went from having 1, maybe 2 viable cEDH decks to having a total overhaul in terms of power and capability within the cEDH metagame. In the summer of 2019, we got the printing of Core Set 2020, and with it the printing of Kaikar, Wind's Fury, who was used in some Storm decks and also in cEDH in some Divergent Transformation style decks, which tried to put the recently printed Niv Mizzet Perun and a creature like Tandem Lookout into play at the same time to combo out the table the next time any player, not opponent, any player cast an instant or sorcery spell. This is a cool new shell that we see in cEDH, which wasn't playing like any other Jeskai deck before it. However, you had to play blue with what were at the time considered the two worst colors in Commander in order to play this sweet new deck. And then, less than 30 days later, Commander 2019, yes, Core Set 2020 came out a month before Commander 2019. There's this whole weird marketing thing that WotC did with core sets that never really made any sense to anyone except for like them and Walmart, but anyway. Commander 2019 included the precon Mystic Intellect, which gave us Dockside Extortionist, arguably the most powerful ritual ever printed, and a card that had Thrasios and Tymna players feeling a little jealous of what those red-inclusive decks got to do with the first time in forever. Mystic Intellect also included the backup commander in the form of Elsha of the Infinite, and for the second time in as many months, baby, we got us a brand spanking new Jeskai deck in cEDH. As Elsha, plus Sensei's Divining Top, plus a cost reducer or a repeatable source of mana means you can draw your whole deck and win however you like. So in the second half of 2019, players were re-evaluating Red because of Dockside, trying out not one but two brand new cEDH Jeskai decks. And then 2020 comes and we get the return to Theros and we get Underworld Breach. A card which, during preview seasons, sparked some debate as to whether it was just a better Yawgmoth's Will, or if it was a side grade, or if it was strictly worse than Yawgmoth's Will. Well, it was discovered fairly quickly that Breach was a game-ending combo piece, which almost completely invalidated Yawgmoth's Will in decks that could play it. Breach presented a win con that was almost impossible to stop because 1 in a red didn't just turn on a combo, but also unlocked every single piece of interaction and counter magic that you'd already played that game. In that same month that Flash Hulk died in April of 2020, we also got Commander 2020 precons and the free if you control your commander cycle of spells, including Fierce Guardianship and Deflecting Swat, giving isn't-inclusive decks not one but two new free ways to control the stack. So, in the space of 9 months, Red had gone from being an also-ran in cEDH to a color that you were just dying to include in your list if at all possible. Jeskai was particularly well positioned to leverage Breach to its fullest. And remember way back at the beginning of our history lesson when we talked about that Mystic Intellect precon, the one with Dockside? Well, it also included the first printing of a card called Savine's Reclamation, a one-shot or I guess technically two-shot Sun Titan effect, which provided an intuition pile in Jeskai that was both very compact in terms of mana and very efficient in terms of mana cost. See, Savine's Reclamation could get Breach back out of the graveyard, since Breach only costs 1 in a red. You don't really care whether your opponents toss your Breach or your Savines into your hand or your graveyard off of Intuition, because you can always flashback Savines to get Breach onto the field. Then you just need to find a way to keep filling up your graveyard, such as a Wheel Effect or Brain Freeze, and you can very quickly storm off and win the game. Brain Freeze, Wheels, both of which, by the way, really readily available in Jeskai color combination. Brain Freeze became one of the favored tools in Jeskai Breach because it could also double as a way to incidentally mill your opponents out. Then, pass the turn around the table to your opponents with empty libraries for a win condition that required very few slots in your deck. The other piece of the Breach package is Lion's Eye Diamond, which fuels the whole thing as a pseudo-Black Lotus with a downside that, when we're exiling cards out of our graveyard, we really don't care about. This makes the package of Breach plus Lion's Eye Diamond plus Savine's Reclamation plus Brain Freeze, which, as an astute audience member that you are, you probably noticed is in fact 4 cards, and not the 3 that Intuition limits you to grabbing. But the power of this is that, unlike with Hulk decks, you really don't get punished for having the quote-unquote wrong card in your hand. If you have an Intuition plus any one of those cards, you have a 2-card combo that can win the game. If, on the other hand, you have an Intuition plus 2 of those cards in your hand, you have a 2-card combo that can win you the game, and also set up another layer of protection with something like Silence or Counter Magic or really whatever else you want. We saw a version of this in Teamer Month with an Intuition Breach package, but Jeskai did it first, and they still do it better. Even in the unarguably fastest color combination of Grixis, you usually don't see intuition packages unless the deck is also on World Gorger Dragon or other animate dead packages, and they don't tend to work unless you've already got World Gorger Dragon in your graveyard. Breach is a blazing fast win condition that signals the end of the game if it resolves, a vast improvement over what Azorius alone usually has access to. Now, of course, like any good cEDH brewers, we should be looking at what our deck's color identity lacks. Just like the first two arcs, we're still not in black, which means we don't have access to the most exclusive rituals in the forms of Dark Ritual or the package of unconditional tutors like Demonic Tutor. It also unfortunately takes us off the easy pivots to win off of the back of a combo like Thoracle Consult, and we lose some potent multicolor value engines like Lotho Corrupt Sheriff or Talion Kindly Ward. And stacks your lists are going to miss out on some of the potent effects like Douthly Voidwalker, Opposition Agent, and Orcish Bowmasters. And not being in green means that we lack the steady ramp that green offers outside of cEDH, or the creature tutors that are a staple of green strategies, like Worldly Tutor or Finale of Devastation. And specifically losing pod and pod-adjacent cards like Neoform and Eldritch Evolution, tools which we used to great effect when we created our creature-based win condition in Teamer Month. See the K9 Fugitive Doctor deck here. These are also out of reach for us. So we lose a lot of the easiest Dockside combos, and we also lose some of the best access to Dockside itself. We still have a reasonable time tutoring it up with the 2 recruiters and with a couple of other effects, but it's pretty slim pickings all around. Now, we're still on Dockside in almost every Jeskai deck in cEDH, because Dockside actually does work pretty well as a substitute for Lion's Eye Diamond as long as we have some access to a sack outlet. Not too hard to cobble together a win when you can get one of the best rituals ever printed in your deck. Not having access to green also means no Boseiju who endures, but we still do get Odawara, Soaring City, arguably the second best channel land out of Neon Dynasty. And that, my friends, is about all I can cram into one episode. Jeskai has some similarities to Teamer, which we covered before, and thanks to Red's explosive rituals, impulsive draws, and rummaging effects coupled with Blue's control over the stack and sustained card advantage engines. But unlike Green's sustained ramp, Jeskai has access to White's additional control and stacks elements, which allows Jeskai to pivot between the turbo game plan and the control game plan depending on the build and its seat at the table. When it plays the control game plan, it has options from Boros and Izzet to pivot on a dime to take advantage of windows and close out the game in short order in ways that we saw Azorius often lacked. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and that you learned something new about Jeskai. As usual, my plan is to bring you a fresh, new take on how to tackle the cEDH metagame in Jeskai to cap off this arc. And one thing you may have noticed that's on many cards that I keep bringing up with green straight-to-play tutors, Underworld Breach, some of the most powerful effects across multiple colors are all stopped by simple stacks pieces like Grafdigger's Cage. And I have a list that's waiting for you that gets to run the powerhouse Breach package that we just explored in this episode, along with other stacks pieces that hose other Breach decks. And I think you're going to like this one. Until next time, though, you can catch us on YouTube as part of Commander Cookout Media Group. You can add us on Twitter, where we are at GemstoneMineMTG, or you can send us an email, gemstoneminepodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm John, and this is Gemstone Mine.